Our story begins with a dense and vast city, with many things happening at the same time, where we have some agents on a mission, like Alpha 2 telling CP that there is nothing abnormal at point 1. CP responds to continue with the observation mission, when suddenly we see a giant monster colliding in the middle of the city. An emergency kaiju alert was issued to the districts. The southern, central, and Isogo areas in the city of Yokohama, Kanagawa Province, residents of the designated areas should seek shelter immediately. The kaiju wreaks havoc on many parts of the city and moves from Yadabashi to Yamashita. Its estimated length is 60 meters, strength level 3-5. Agents are on the streets in helicopters to stop the kaiju. Nothing is detected on thermal sensors within a 3 km radius. All units open fire, getting the kaiju's attention by hitting it. Several soldiers jump from the helicopters, all heavily armed, and begin firing at the kaiju. The kaiju tries to attack them, but they are all very well trained. Until one of the soldiers had a special weapon that with just one shot managed to kill the giant beast. Next, we see a guy eating a hamburger while looking at how much dirt that kaiju had left. Probably that was going to give him a good extra hour, because cleaning up won't be an easy task. The residents are greeting the members of the 3rd Division after they managed to defeat the kaiju. Once again, the 3rd Division managed to defeat the kaiju without casualties. All team members came out unscathed. Everyone considers the 3rd Division the protector of the future. All that celebration was a sign of gratitude from the people. The guy we saw earlier who worked with cleaning goes to see up close the residents welcoming the members of the 3rd Division who were responsible for the victory that day. And then the cleaning job begins, the cleaning crew's battle begins, when the kaiju killer's battle ends. No one roots for the cleaning crew, and no one shows up thanking for the work of cleaning the city after a kaiju is taken down. Kafka Hibino is one of those cleaning agents who has an unknown battle against the kaiju. A drone approaches Kafka saying that Izumo Tech wants a sample of that kaiju. Kafka takes a sample and hands it to the drone. Then there is a work accident as the team begins to lift a piece of the kaiju that should not have been lifted yet, and suddenly it explodes, spraying a liquid that appears to be acidic to human skin as it hurts the knee of one of Kafka's co-workers, who quickly goes down to help him, asking for a stretcher. Kafka tells him not to worry because he only touched the surface and it had already happened to him. Next, Kafka uses a type of substance on the guy's knee to help in the healing process and alleviate the pain. He also asks the guy not to forget to send the accident report. It was always that mess when the 3rd Division arrived. It was hard to tell what was organ and what wasn't. To make matters worse, they wanted the cleaning agents to finish the job by the weekend. Cleaning up the mess a kaiju leaves behind is really tough. Next, Kafka is notified that they are going to send him elsewhere because they had a shortage in the team. Kafka asks where to, and his coworker responds that it's to the gut. Kafka tries to escape, but it doesn't help much as they manage to hold him, saying that management has already given permission. Another coworker says he's heard about it, but asks if the gut is really that bad. And the other coworker replies, "Think about what's in the gut, and then you tell me." Next, Kafka looks at the gut with tear-filled eyes and vomiting. Everyone who's sent there goes for a long time without eating. Kafka grabs a chainsaw to saw one of the intestines and starts crying with, well, you know. After work hours, Kafka throws his keys on the table, flops onto the bed, and screams that he's dead tired. Kafka still continued to smell that terrible part he was assigned to clean. He grabs a tissue and starts blowing his nose and looks at the TV. Through the TV, he sees the news coverage talking about the 3rd Division, especially talking about his childhood friend. And he remembers when they were younger, with Kafka telling her that they would defeat many kaijus together. Kafka watches the program while smoking a cigarette. Kafka sees through the TV that she will have a bright future. The young man wonders how he ended up there. After all, what he desires unfortunately didn't come true. When suddenly, he freaks out because he shouldn't think about that, saying that cleaning is already an important job, anyway he helps society. Kafka continues to think that although things aren't as he wanted, he lived in a nice apartment and could eat whatever he wanted. That was good enough. The next day, Kafka is on his bike and feeling a lot of headache and guilt from that report yesterday. He arrives at his destination and says good morning to the group, who quickly calls him. One of his colleagues introduces Ikikawa. He would start his internship with them that day. The guy tells Kafka that Ikikawa wants to join the defense force, and the guy continues to tell Ikikawa that Kafka wanted to as well in the past, but gave up, and now he's a relic in the department. Kafka finds all that boring, and Ikikawa asks Kafka why he gave up. Kafka says he did his best, but he thinks there's always someone better than us, and that he reached his limit and that one day Ikikawa would understand when he got older. But Ikikawa denies he wouldn't understand because he wouldn't give up, and before understanding he would already be dead and wouldn't even want to understand, and then leaves to change. The other coworker who was with the two swore that Kafka and Ikikawa would get along. Kafka gets a little angry, thinking that anything he said would make him look like a fool, and wonders if giving up is really that bad. Then the work begins. Miyike's team continues to clean the bones, and some important bones of the structure were already ready for Izumo Tech. Yoshimura's team starts partitioning the leg, and the newcomer goes to the intestines, which makes Kafka very happy, but he is assigned to go to the intestines again, which makes him very angry because it would be 2 days in a row. But the team leader says he's good with intestines, and even though he's angry, he's content and goes. The guy responsible for organizing the work says he complains but always goes, and continues saying that Kafka would be great in the defense force if he had been approved. Then we see Kafka and Ikikawa in the park, and Kafka hoping he feels the terrible stench, when suddenly they both feel it at the same time. Kafka observes that Ikikawa had only brought that lunchbox, and Ikikawa says he won't be able to eat. Kafka throws a vitamin supplement hitting Ikikawa's face and says that if it was good for him to have something in his stomach to be able to endure the whole afternoon. And Ikikawa says he doesn't need it, but Kafka doesn't let him speak, giving him nose plugs, saying that it helped a lot. Ikikawa gets scared, saying he didn't understand anything Kafka said, and denies again, saying he didn't need it. Kafka tells him to stop being stubborn and just put it in his nose, and tries to force Ikikawa to use it. And then they go back to work. After spending the afternoon working, some co-workers pack their things and put them in the cars to leave. Kafka estava checking everything and is happy because the smelliest part of the job was over. Ikikawa approaches Kafka, and Kafka asks him if he wanted to get back at him for what he had done at lunch. But Ikikawa actually came to say that thanks to Kafka, he managed to win his first day, thanking Kafka. Ikikawa is a little embarrassed and says that was all, and turns his back, saying goodbye, saying they would see each other tomorrow. However, before Ikikawa leaves, he tells Kafka that they raised the age limit to 32 years to be able to enlist in the defense force. Kafka is speechless upon hearing that. Ikikawa says that the force was talking about not having any more young people, far from Ikikawa controlling Kafka's life, but Kafka had made a very sad face when he talked about giving up. Ikikawa pretends not to care, saying that if he had been wrong, Kafka could give up because he didn't care, and then bids farewell, but Kafka thanks him, saying that Ikikawa was nicer than he thought. When Ikikawa was about to say he didn't care, a kaiju appears behind him. He didn't have time to react, but Kafka manages to save him by quickly pulling him away. When the kaiju was about to grab Ikikawa again, Kafka manages to defend him again, telling Ikikawa to run as fast as he can, and when he's safe, get help. Ikikawa didn't want to leave him alone, but Kafka says that 1 or 2 people wouldn't make a difference. If Ikikawa wanted to join the defense force, he couldn't die there. Ikikawa resists, but then runs away. Kafka attracts the kaiju's attention and starts running. The kaiju is very fast, but Kafka manages to run fast enough to not be caught. He enters a place where the kaiju doesn't have space to enter. And then he breaks the window and jumps, and remembers his childhood with his friend. His friend was crying. And Kafka said everything had fallen, their homes, the school. Kafka shows a lot of anger against the kaiju, saying that he was so close to defeating Gurman. And the girl asks him if that's why he's sad, and then tells Kafka that she was sad because her cat Mieko had died. And at that moment they both say they will join the defense force. But Kafka says she was just a kid, and the girl says he's still in elementary school too. And Kafka says, let's see who becomes the coolest officer in the defense force, saying they would kick kaiju butt together. And then he falls to the ground, thinking it wasn't supposed to be like this, and the kaiju manages to reach him. He aims at the kaiju's leg, but the kaiju manages to attack him. While he's in the air, he thinks about how he got into that situation. After all, he wanted to be in the defense force. As he groans in pain and sees that he is quite injured and his leg too, the kaiju devours him. At the moment that was about to happen, Ikikawa saves Kafka, attacking him through the mouth, and tells Kafka that he has already called for reinforcements. If Ikikawa left Kafka there, he would never be able to join the defense force. And then Kafka remembers the papers showing the result in which he was rejected. Kafka thinks he's useless because nothing changed. He can't protect anything, not even his video game, not his friend's cat, not even the kid from his job. And when the kaiju was about to kill Ikikawa, a white tiger appears and attacks the kaiju. Until we see that the kaiju was shot down because the 3rd Division was there. The 3rd Division sees that there are injured and begins the rescue process. Poor Kafka sees all that without saying a word because he was very injured. Then Kafka is in the hospital, thinking how awesome Mina is. After all, she took down that monster in less than a second. Kafka stayed behind for a long time. Suddenly, Ikikawa talks to him, which makes Kafka take a big scare because he thought he was alone. And Ikikawa says that when that kaiju appeared and Kafka told him to run away, if Kafka hadn't saved him, he would have died that day. Ikikawa thinks Kafka is cool, which surprises Kafka and reminds him again of that old good memory he had with Mina, where they said they would see who would be the coolest officer in the defense force. Ikikawa continues to say that Kafka really should reconsider joining the defense force and continues to say that Kafka's decision is up to him. He doesn't care. Kafka wonders how long he intends to pretend. And then he thanks Ikikawa, saying that he was really a nice guy. Kafka doesn't see anything wrong with giving up, but lying to himself isn't good, and he would give the defense force another chance. But as he says this, he realizes that there is a kaiju right in front of him, and he freezes without saying a word. And the kaiju says he finally found him. And before he could say anything, the kaiju enters his body. The presence of the kaiju inside Kafka was making him squirm, while Ikikawa didn't understand anything. When Ikikawa reaches Kafka, he sees that Kafka has become a scary creature, and Kafka looks at himself through the window's reflection, and they both scream in terror. Kafka tries to explain that it was him to Ikikawa, but an old man hears the screaming, sees Kafka, and calls to report. Ikikawa tells both to flee immediately.